The Holy Gospel according to Luke. Glory to you, O Lord.
Lord.
When the angels had left them and gone into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, "Let us go now to Bethlehem and see this thing that has taken place, which the Lord has made known to us." So they went with haste and found Mary and Joseph and the child lying in a manger. When they saw this, they made known what had been told to them about this child. And all who heard it were amazed at what the shepherds had told them. But Mary treasured all of these words and pondered them in her heart. The shepherds then returned, glorifying and praising God for all that they had heard and seen, as it had been told to them. And after 8 days had passed, it was time to circumcise the child. And he was called Jesus, the name given by the angel before he was conceived in the womb. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Well, this gospel reading sounds a lot like what we read on Christmas Eve. However, the last verse is where today's feast day comes into play. And we had heard that on the 8th day, Jesus was circumcised and was given his name, Jesus. And all in all, it's a pretty routine Jewish experience for an infant boy. With circumcision, the child was now included in the Abrahamic covenant. That is, the covenant where God promised to bless Abraham and his descendants. And his descendants would be as numerous as all of the stars in the sky. But for me, probably the most interesting part of today's reading comes at the back half of that final verse, which says, "He was called Jesus, the name given by the angel before he was conceived in the womb." Now, naming the child Jesus was important. You see, after all, names are a significant part of our identity. The name that we are given by our parents can carry cultural or familial connections. And sometimes people change their name to better reflect their essence or their history or their personality or their gender expression. And still others take maybe a larger name and they adapt it or shorten it or maybe use a different part of their name like their middle name instead. And you see, because of the power that names carry, my partner's name was changed way back as a child, so I know this importance of identity and naming all too well. You see, originally, he was born with a first, middle, and last name of Alexander Paulino Gibson. So Paulino was his middle name, and it was actually his mom's last name. And then Gibson was his father's last name. And so shortly after his parents made that legal name when he was born, his parents were at home and they began reflecting on his name a bit more. Now, while his name had both maternal, remember the middle name, and paternal, the last name, his father's name, they acknowledged that the middle name so often in the United States is silenced. And so too, that feminine voice is often silenced in our world as well. So ultimately, his parents went and legally changed his name to first name Alexander, middle name nada, that means nothing, and then last name Paulino-Gibson. So now his name change, of course, complicates things because he doesn't have a middle name. But his name also voices something important. It voices the importance of feminine equality. His name now communicates a change in the way that the world often devalues the maternal name. And his name now reflects his family's values. And so too, the name Jesus reflects the values and illuminates God's nature. And to understand that connection, we need to have some fun, or at least what I think of fun, some fun with history and lingual. So we're going to kind of do a history and lingual lesson here. So stick with me. I know some of you, this is not your favorite thing. I'll summarize in a moment. Okay, so the name Jesus comes from a Greek translation of the Aramaic short form, Yeshua, which is Jesus' actual name, Yeshua. Now, the longer form of the name is Yehoshua, Yehoshua, which in English we say Joshua. Now, Yehoshua comes from the roots Yeho and Yasha. Yeho refers to the Jewish God, so Yud He Vav He, or what we may say in English, Yahweh. And Yasha means to save. So Yehoshua literally means God saves. Okay, so if I completely lost you, come back to me now. Reframe yourself. Here's the summary. Jesus' name is the same as Joshua, and this name means God saves. Okay, so we're going to take all of that. Jesus means Joshua, which means God saves, and we're going to move into part 2 of this exploration. And this is bringing in kind of the historical, biblical component. So, here we go. Joshua is an important figure in the Hebrew Scriptures, or the Old Testament. He was Moses' assistant, and then eventually he took over leading the Israelites to the Promised Land after Moses died. His leadership was one that was built on fighting to occupy or take the land promised to them by God. And then he eventually split up the land that they acquired, and he divided it among the tribes of Israel. And at the end of the book of Joshua, he told the elders and chiefs of Israel to not mix with the native populations, because it could lead them to be unfaithful to God. Okay, so why does this all matter? Well, as we read through Luke's gospel, it's important to remember that Jesus received the name Joshua. Why? Because names matter. Names communicate a sense of values. You know, in this case, however, what we're going to find out throughout the Gospel of Luke is that this newly born Joshua, or Jesus, this newly born Joshua named Jesus is going to be in contrast to the Joshua in the Hebrew Scriptures. For we will learn that Jesus will birth a new Israel, not based on the laws of purity that reject the outsider, but rather this new Joshua, this Jesus, will welcome the outsiders. Hard stop. Jesus will reveal that God's work is centered in love and radical generosity and peacemaking and forgiveness. It's going to be something different than that old Joshua in the Hebrew Scriptures was doing. You see, because Jesus will make the argument that he is the new Moses, that he is the new Joshua, and that this free, newly formed Israel will have the opportunity to be torn away from the tyranny of evil. You see, Jesus will shock his audience when he tells of a parable about religious leaders who were meant to help the people, when those religious leaders went past a man who was hurt on the side of the road. And then all of a sudden, this Samaritan, this person whom they did not like, this outsider, this Samaritan, the good Samaritan, will stop and then take care of that man who was in need on the side of the road. You see, this new Joshua, this Jesus, is going to reveal the ways that systems and social forces and status quo tend toward corruption and the superiority of just the few. You see, what we will find in this gospel is that names matter. Names communicate values. This new Joshua, this Jesus, will hold on to the centrality of what his name means. God saves. And at the same time, Jesus will redefine what salvation looks like. And so as we begin this new calendar year, well, we have the opportunity to think about the values that are communicated with our names. Now, sure, we could think about personal names like Jesus and Joshua and things like Reverend Jason Scott Glambicki or Dr. Jordan Diego Chua, but what I'm going to challenge us to do today is think about names less in the personal and think about it more in the collective, in the communal. And so let's think back to this church back in 1879 when this congregation was first founded. And you see, the people who founded this congregation, well, they didn't go with things like St. Luke or St. John or Holy Trinity Lutheran Church. Rather, they named our ministry Wicker Park Lutheran Church. And what the scriptures are reminding us today is that names matter. Names communicate value. And so I wonder, how does the name Wicker Park Lutheran Church, how does, more specifically, the term Wicker Park in our name communicate a value? Or what does it mean that we are called Lutheran and that we center our identity in a reformer who strove to clarify and expand God's work? Or what does it mean to claim the name Christian and our identity focused on learning from Jesus and acknowledging Christ's presence? What does it mean that through the baptismal waters we have taken on the likeness of Christ? Or that at Christ's table God's essence becomes embedded in our DNA? Today, we wonder, what do these names that we embrace communicate about our identity and our values? So perhaps as we reflect on that at the beginning of this year, perhaps this will reveal what we value and help recenter ourselves in serving our neighbor through things like, well, the Little Free Pantry, or serving with the Night Ministry Health Outreach Bus, or perhaps giving for the Advent Project. Maybe it will mean that we can find ways to love our neighbors during this exponential COVID spike, and especially those who are youngest among us, those under 5. Maybe it will look like committing to get our booster, or committing to be vaccinated, or to wearing our mask more diligently. Maybe by knowing the importance of Jesus' name as a new Joshua, then maybe it means we will take names in general a bit more seriously. Maybe we will push aside the white supremacy in ourselves that really lifts up things that are more typical names, John Smith, right? And instead will allow us to really focus on pronouncing the names of people of color more clearly and intentionally as they were designed to communicate, or to take more seriously and honor the names that our trans siblings are claiming and embracing as a part of their God-given identity. You see, maybe it means that our Christian faith and tradition that reveres and honors the culture and the historical and the familial roots the names carry, maybe we can take that really seriously. Maybe, just maybe. Well, friends, as we ponder the seriousness of names and the ways that our God has come among us, I'm going to leave us here for today. I'm going to leave us pondering in the silence in just a moment what Jesus' identity, this new Joshua, might mean for us. And maybe this will give us the opportunity to acknowledge the values and to reshape our understanding of identity. for Jesus' ministry and the way Jesus transformed and reshaped their understanding of the people in Luke's time, well, that also does something for us in this time as well. It shifts us, it reforms us, it transforms us. And so as we move into this new calendar year, let us give thanks for a God who reveals an identity of love and justice and grace. Let us ponder the identity that we embrace and for the names that we claim. Let us today, on this feast day, give thanks for this new Joshua, Jesus.